The Witcher series has amassed a huge following. With Witcher 3 closing the book on Geralt's story, the question remains, what should Witcher 4 look like without him? While I would have loved to have read the books in preparation for this video, I didn't have time, so book readers, feel free to correct me on anything in the comments. Let's begin. Based on the teaser image released by CD Projekt Red, we can see the next Witcher game will be based on the School of the Lynx. While there has been fan-made content of this school, the Lynx group hasn't previously been featured in the Witcher lore, meaning this is brand new content from CD Projekt Red, and that the game can't be a prequel. What we can infer from this is that after the events of Witcher 3, someone rediscovered a way to create witches, unless we're playing as peasants in the next installment. Now we've established what we know, let's look at the fundamental gameplay loop and the systems individually. With Geralt out of the way, we need a fresh new story and character. While some fans have suggested Ciri for the main protagonist of Witcher 4, I think her power level would take away from the core gameplay of being a Witcher. She could be featured in the main story or with a cameo side mission, but for my pitch, let's create our own character. We could either start as a boy preparing for the Trial of Grasses with an eventual time jump, but I prefer starting as an adult Witcher training at Kaer Morhen, purely to hand freedom to the player quicker. Now we have our character, let's look at the gameplay loop we'll be experiencing with them. The Witcher already has a decent gameplay loop built into its lore. You explore the world and engage in alchemy to better fight monsters. You fight enemies, mainly with your steel and silver swords. You have quests unrelated to monsters, and you have monster hunting in the form of contracts. These not only sound good on paper, but also have a proven track record from previous Witcher games. Instead of redesigning the wheel, let's hone in on these aspects individually and do what we can to improve them. Let's start with monster hunting, which will naturally incorporate the other elements of gameplay. In previous games, Geralt takes a contract, researches the beast in the bestiary, makes a potion to prepare, then fights the monster. These were fine, but I've identified some problems, like how the fight with the monsters, regardless of their size, results in Geralt hacking away at their legs with his sword. Contracts would work similarly to 3, with them being posted on village boards and through talking to NPCs and negotiating prices. The bestiary should be an actual book you flick through, just to make it more grounded in the game's world. Alchemy should also have its own book and be given a large amount of focus. You'll have to research the plants' locations and travel to those locations to gather them. Once you have said plants, you would then engage in a potion minigame that will yield better performing potions based on the alchemy skill of the player. As I mentioned, it feels anticlimactic to get to a towering monster and hack away at its legs until the health bar goes down. Let's get tips from Monster Hunter and Dragon's Dogma. Monsters should have multiple phases that include different attacks and different areas to take up the fight. Stalk a huge beast in the forest, and maybe a third of the way through the fight, it will run to attack a nearby village, causing you to choose between pursuing your monster or temporarily letting it go to save civilians. Having the beast move between different areas and biomes would allow for a diversity of tactics and visuals dependent on the setting the monster has fled to. To avoid hacking at the legs, let's introduce dropping aerial attacks that the player can implement if they are higher than the monster. These would count as critical hits and would force the player to properly inspect their surroundings and plan correctly for the fight. From Dragon's Dogma, let's take the climbing system to make conflicts with larger monsters more engaging. Reduce the enemy's health enough and they'll be temporarily dazed, allowing you to climb up them to deal attacks to more vulnerable areas, like the eyes, brain and throat. These would differentiate combat encounters to a satisfying degree. Giants would frantically run around, bashing into walls and clawing at you, whereas dragons and wyverns could fly you high up into the air, potentially taking the fight to a different setting as discussed earlier. The use of traps before a monster fight would be another cool addition, setting up spike traps, trip lines, swinging logs, and rocks that can be tipped onto the monster. Again, these would add to the overall preparation the player would need to go through to prove successful in these combat encounters, further immersing them in the role of a Witcher. To recap, we've added multiple boss phases including different moves, different areas within those phases to diversify the fight, aerial and contextual based critical attacks to give the player more tactical options in combat, a climbing system to provide more engaging fights against bigger monsters, and setting up traps before fights. With these 5 new additions, I think the game could stand alone with this as its core feature. But as players will be expecting a lot more by the time Witcher 4 releases, let's look at other mechanics and systems. Now we've established a big difference between fighting monsters and humans, let's hone in on the standard combat. Fighting humanoid creatures within The Witcher 4 should take inspiration from the following games. Witcher 3's combat and finisher animations felt clunky. Sometimes they started early, or the sword wouldn't connect with the target. Ghost of Tsushima had a smooth transition between base player attacks and finisher animations, so it would be good to see this implemented in The Witcher 4. Sekiro had an amazing blade-on-blade combat, and while The Witcher 4 wouldn't need to be as crushingly difficult, they should aim for a similar energy as in Sekiro fights. CD Projekt Red should keep the limb dismemberment, and if anything, add to it. The more you level up with Blade, the higher chance you have of taking off someone's torso or head, scaring other enemies and looking really cool. Signs would work the same as in Witcher 3, however they'd be quicker to switch between, allowing for more rapid reactive combat without sacrificing the mental tactical approach to its design. The same would go for oils for your sword, as Witcher 3 kept them behind the pause menu, resulting in unnecessary breaks to combat. I believe Witcher 4 should have a voiced protagonist. Silent could still work, but I think it would sacrifice some of the more impactful conversations and arguments when it's only one person talking. Whereas The Witcher 3's dialogue had static camera work with limited movement, action should take place in dialogue at critical moments, similar to Cyberpunk's system. It would make non-combat scenes more engaging, like visiting taverns where you can play Gwent, interact with bards and storytellers, and eavesdrop on relevant information on contracts, or shady characters. Seeing as a Witcher would constantly be travelling to find work, some simple survival elements would fit right at home for The Witcher 4. Camping equipment is stored on your horse, with a bedroll and a cooking pot to refill your hunger bar. An alchemy minigame with more complex formulas requiring mastery of this system and rarer ingredients. Sword sharpening, while not essential, further commits the player to the role and would save the player constant trips to the blacksmith to repair their sword. Camping would also give the player the time to read books they find in-game, as opposed to it staying unused in their inventory. The player should also have a deep connection with their horse, similar to Red Dead Redemption 2, being able to feed them, brush them, pet them, and having the horses be mortal as opposed to roach would give the player sad, memorable story moments should the horse ever be killed, but also provides the opportunity to upgrade to rarer, tougher horses. The horse riding itself also needs a complete redesign, as the current system is weightless, clunky, and unimpactful. Again, looking toward Red Dead Redemption 2, improved physics like being thrown from your horse if you crash would be more engaging than just holding a button to follow the road. I've mentioned it a few times now, but The Witcher 3 is undeniably clunky. For the final time, taking inspiration from Red Dead Redemption 2, we should make movement feel more natural. Let me have brief interactions with lesser NPCs, as it would aid role-playing in letting the character choose between the friendly Witcher and the silent, brooding/nasty Witcher. Being a good Witcher would involve helping people, fostering a good reputation, making friends, and overall turning from an outcast freak into a beloved monster slayer. Whereas the bad Witcher would involve murdering innocents, being rude, and leaving people to die in situations where you could easily help. Commit enough crime, however, and the law and fellow Witchers will track you down and attempt to kill you. This design philosophy should be implemented carefully, as the original morally grey choices and no happy endings are a large part of this game's formula. So this would be for simple NPC interactions, whereas morally grey decisions won't look to judge the player. While each of the previous Witcher games had a main story for the player to experience as Geralt, does The Witcher 4 necessarily need a main questline? Is there any need for a big bad looking to take over the world? The objective of a main storyline is supposedly to give the player primary motivation and a clear objective. However, I feel like this has become an excuse to dump a large portion of the budget in one place and tack on a bunch of meaningless filler content. Side quests were a strong feature of The Witcher 3, with the main plot revolving around finding Ciri. Geralt had opportunities to help others to obtain information on her whereabouts. The game should be filled with that, interesting, well-written characters of different positions in the feudal hierarchy for you to help or hinder as you see fit. Perhaps 2/3 of the way through you can reveal a villain responsible for some evil set up early and hinted at through side quests and NPC chatter to tie up the ending. However, I think it would be enough for the objective to be to make money as a monster hunter. This would be less hand-holding for the player and inspire agency and freedom, exploring certain areas of the world in your choice of order. Do you want to spend loads of times in one area, doing all the side quests, building your reputation, uncovering secrets, and making friends? Or do you want to do one contract, kill the contract giver because he refused to pay, then flee to a different part of the map to escape the law? This would add huge replay value that wouldn't work for an established character like Geralt. Speaking of Geralt, he should definitely have a secret mission where you help him with a contract. With CD Projekt Red switching to Unreal Engine 5, it would be great to see some quality of life improvements over previous games. With extensive customization for our newly made character, immersive tactical boss battles, smooth combat, and the same writing, world design, and character of the previous games, The Witcher 4 could be a fresh new direction for this already beloved franchise. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and add your ideas in the comments. Peace and love.